Are we all ready, Amanda? Thank you. I see by my watch it's 6:30, so welcome everyone to the July 4th, 2023 Planning and Land Use Committee meeting. Unfortunately, Councillor Ward sent his regrets. He's traveling for business, and so I am the lucky stand-in. My name is Councillor Dean Jansen, and firstly, I would like to acknowledge that with respect that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, and we're honored to have the opportunity to build strong working relationships with the people of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. So I'd like to call the meeting to order and approve of the agenda. So there is a slight amendment with item 5.1 being removed from the agenda. Can I get a mover for the amended agenda? Thank you very much. And all those in favor of the agenda, thank you. You get all that, Amanda? Thank you. All right, we have some minutes to adopt. May 1st, 2023 Planning and Land Use Committee meeting minutes. We'd like to move that we adopt those minutes, please. Thank you, James. Anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you. And public participation. Do we have, other than proponents, do we have any members of the public to speak to the items? Thank you, Amanda. So we do have some late submissions that are in writing, and I would like to, if we can get someone to move receipt of those. We've all received them by email or hard copy, is that correct? Thank you. Anyone opposed to receipt? Thank you so much. Are we moving too quickly, Amanda? You were writing, sorry. All right then, moving right along. So there's no the new 5.1, I'd like to call on Kelsea for a development variance permit DVP 23004 for 783 Cuaulta Crescent.
Thank you. I'd first like to introduce myself to this committee. My name is Kelsea Fielden. I'm Planner 1, the City of Colwood, and I've been here for just over 2 years. So for agenda item 5.1, development variance permit for 583 Cuaulta Crescent. So the applicant is requesting a relaxation to the front yard setback of an existing home from 7.5 meters to 7.2 meters and a relaxation to the minimum width of an access strip to two proposed panhandle lots from 6 meters to 5.33 meters to enable the proposed subdivision of the lands. Oh, it's me. My apologies. So the property has a lot size of just over 3,600 square meters and is considered a through lot as it extends across both ends of Cuaulta Crescent and is currently home to one single family dwelling. It is zoned R1, which is standard Colwood single family home zoning, and is located in the Triangle Mountain neighborhood, which is designated as hillside and shoreline in the OCP. The applicant has applied to subdivide the large property to create 4 total lots. All requirements from the land use bylaw must be met or varied to enable the subdivision. The applicant is requesting a reduction to the front yard setback for the existing home seen as proposed lot D. The home was built prior to the adoption of the Colwood land use bylaw in 1989. The variance request is a reduction of approximately 11 inches. Secondly, for proposed lots A and B, you can see on screen, the applicant is requesting to decrease the minimum width of an access strip from 6 meters to 5.33 meters for each lot. The applicant is proposing the use of a reciprocal access to enable a 6-meter total shared driveway access to protect the mature trees along the property line of proposed lot B. The shared driveway will be accommodated almost entirely on the access strip of proposed lot A. So the neighborhood hillside and shoreline designation is to be exceptionally supportive of protecting natural features and sensitive ecological areas. An environmental development permit will be required and be subject to site adaptive planning principles, which is just under review right now by staff. The designation is supportive of the single detached residential use. Development notification signs have been posted on site per council policy, and postcards have been sent to neighbors within 75 meters advising of the variance decision. The property owner, I don't believe that they're here tonight or on the phone. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Committee may wish to consider recommending to council one of the following options: approve, defer, deny, or identify another option. So the application, which would have the effect of varying the front yard setback and minimum access width. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to provide any more information.
Thank you, Kelsey. Questions from committee? Thank you.
Hi, Kelsey. I wanted to ask you a few questions. First question I have is the city of Colwood have any inside information more than I do? And I don't mean inside information in the way that I don't want to appear negative, but come November, from what I know, the BC government will be enacting legislation which allows 4 units on any single family lot. Do you have any information to the contrary? Is that, I mean, I know you can never guess, but is there anything new that the city knows about in that respect?
I'm not aware that we have any policies from the government brought down to Colwood yet.
Thank you. My next questions relate to the correspondence from the neighbors. So my first question is, we've got some concerns regarding the environment and nature. Am I correct in assuming that that will be dealt at a different date?
Yes, great question. That's right. It'll be the environmental regulations will be through the environmental development permit.
Okay, thank you. And I note in the letter from Mr. Ross Shields, there's a reference to a border on the driveway, and I just can't visualize that. I know that there's a panhandle and that there would be shared access, and the owner developer is asking that the prescribed width be shrunk. But are you aware, is there any easement with respect to Mr. Shields? And just trying to understand, practically speaking, what imposition it may or may not be placing on Mr. Shields, if you could help me out with what knowledge you have.
Yeah, great question as well. That is more a question directed to the approving officer as part of the actual subdivision application. I'm not aware at this time that there is an existing easement. I suspect that those conversations will happen at the subdivision stage regarding the neighboring property.
But is Mr. Shields' access on his own property or not? Do we know?
At this, yeah, at this time I can't really speak to the neighboring property and their access currently. Any questions regarding access during the subdivision stage with neighboring properties will be dealt at that stage, not at this stage yet.
All right, so we're not missing anything if that's deferred to the subdivision phase.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Just hit your button. Perfect. Thank you so much. So just for clarity, just give me half a tick, James, please. But just for clarity, we are here to consider the requested items, which are specific, the setback and then the road width. Am I right, Kelsey, those 2 items?
Exactly, yes.
So what the proponent is asking for is an easing of the setback from 7.5 meters, which is the required setback, to 7.2 meters. Where is that setback specifically? Which property line?
So
Or is that to the street?
that's correct. So if you're looking at it would be, yeah, if you're looking on Cuaulta, it'd be the front street, almost where the driveway access is on the existing home. So the front yard setback is, the house is quite high.
Right.
And the setback would be measured from the property line of kind of that rock outcrop to the front of the house.
I gotcha. So, and then did I hear right and read right that that I almost said predates Confederation, but I meant incorporation.
That's correct, yes. The home was built prior to the 1989 adoption of the R1 zone.
Okay, so in essence, that building was there before our bylaws were created. Okay. And we do see this situation on occasion. And then the other issue is the width of the shared roadway. Is that right?
Yes, so the land use bylaw requires that for a panhandle lot, each width is 6 meters. And so the applicant is requesting a 5.33 meter for each. As a mitigation to that, he's proposing a 6 meter total shared driveway that will go to both panhandles, but on a regulatory basis, the two panhandles need to have that 6 meters each, squeezing it to 5.3, and then he will create a 6 to go to both.
And the quid pro quo for that was that he can route the roadway around a stand of trees. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So the net benefit to the community is perhaps we can save some trees, but I mean, in your experience, routing a road right along some adjacent trees oftentimes doesn't improve the tree's health, shall we say? You're not an arborist, I get it.
Yeah, my apologies, I'm not the arborist, but yeah, the arborist report is in there and it notes that that section does have mature trees. That does have the opportunity to be saved, particularly because the access will be off entirely almost on proposed lot A, which is the farthest away from the trees.
Okay, and James, I don't see it coming up here. Hang on. No, I'm good. I'm trying to go to you now, but I just don't see you here. Can we cancel that and hit it again? Try that. He shows it's empty. There you go.
Wonderful. Yeah, I think it's important that you brought it back to what the specific agenda item is. First of being the setback for the existing lot. I don't see any particular issue with that. As mentioned, it was in existence before a lot of these land use bylaws came into practice. One of the things that I want to speak to, and I really do wish that we had the opportunity to ask more questions of I believe it was Ross who's putting forward this plan, is the motivation for 4 lots, splitting out this particular area of land into such small sections. And then when looking at some of those sections, some of the issues that we're going to be facing. So I'll start with like where the existing property exists, which will be lot D on the northeast corner of all these areas of land. The driveway and most parking lot of that house sits in what's the now proposed lot C. So are there any mitigation strategies for how they're going to reroute the driveway and all the existing parking? Because the footprint of proposed lot D is mostly consumed by the house itself. And I guess I'll start with at least that first item before continuing with the other sort of questions I have.
Great question through the chairs. I also understand it's all slightly a bit more of a subdivision question in terms of the easements and the right of ways for both of those properties between proposed C and proposed lot D. So each property does need to show that off-street parking can be accommodated on site. So proposed lot D will need to show that at least the 2 parking spots for the residential use can be accommodated on site. Similarly to proposed lot C, they'll need to provide all their own off-street parking on site. But yeah, in terms of the current driveway and how that will be accessed for proposed lot C, that will be discussed at subdivision.
And we don't need to know that information before we approve any zoning. It feels hard to endorse something when it's hard to see that there's a clear plan with the use of the land, especially with how it's starting to become very tight in that particular area. So do we have any like development plans for any of these lots to understand what the intended rerouting and off-street parking plans are?
Yes, through the chair again. So the subdivision and the development variance permit are kind of happening concurrently. So the applicant has been provided what's called a PLA, preliminary layout assessment, which says if you would like to subdivide here, here's the checklist that needs to happen. And so the applicant is working on those requirements, which include what is your off-street parking plan, what is your driveway plan, and that is reviewed by staff when those plans come forward. So the applicant is working on those at the moment. And if that can't be sustained, then the subdivision wouldn't be finalized. If they can be sustained per the bylaws of the city, then it would move forward if these variances would be approved. So
okay.
talking slightly about two different.
Right, okay, so just to confirm, it's possible that the zoning approval is contingent on a viable plan?
Also great questions. If I'm understanding correctly, so when a subdivision plan is approved, it will need to comply with the zone and with the land use bylaw. Currently, the only two things that aren't compliant are the two variances in front of you. Everything else so far is compliant.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
So I just personally, I struggle to see how they're planning to use that space. Because then that brings us into proposed lot C, which is, I mean, for the lack of better words, at the bottom of the valley. The lot lines start several, I'll call it tens of meters up, and then the middle of the lot is at the bottom here where there is a small pond that appears during heavy rainfall. So water management is a big concern for lot C, especially with how much runoff comes from all areas surrounding it. And then moving towards proposed lot A and B, I did have the opportunity to go to that area and take a look at where the survey lines are, and the existing property to the south, which is Ron Shields's property. As mentioned, a lot of these lots and houses on them existed before a lot of the current land use requirements, and therefore, if you look at where the survey lines are, it pretty much encroaches immediately onto his driveway. And so there's an immediate concern about how the implementation of this proposed shared driveway would result in him being impacted. So what you see when going there is two gravel lots, one leading up to Mr. Shields's property, the other leading towards these empty property, proposed lot A and proposed lot B, separated by probably roughly 2 meters of just rocking and outcropping one small tree and the grass and general foliage that grows upon it. And so the main point that I'm trying to drive home, and the primary point of concern that I have, is I don't believe that there's enough space in that particular area. If they were going to carry forward with it, I would like to entertain the proposal where the shared driveway is also to Mr. Shields' benefit, where he is allowed to use it just because of how little space there ultimately is for him after drawing the lot lines. And then again, it all comes down to why 4 lots in this particular area, when, from my personal opinion, 2 seems more than reasonable when considering the character of the area and how it's not really in fitting with how the land could possibly be used in the currently proposed zoning. So ultimately, I have several kind of concerns with just zoning when there's no clear plan on how to use that land. So long-winded answer to the first variance for the setback, no problems. I know that we're not talking about the zoning for the lots, but it kind of drives the point home with the panhandle use and what's gonna happen there. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. And just a question arises for me, Kelsey, the 600 centimeters versus the 530 centimeters. Do we have feedback from the fire department as to any concerns in that regard?
Through the chair, there's no concerns from the fire department. They're able to access with that 6-meter shared driveway. So when lots are created during this subdivision process, all the geotechnical, environmental constraints of the land is intended or safe for the use intended is all done at subdivision. The only thing that we don't usually have at that stage is the actual built form. What is it going to look like when you have steep grades? What is the house going to look like? All the subdivision is creating that lot, making that all of those reports that we got, the use of a single family home is safe for that use intended. The driveway access for the neighbor is also a plan that will be discussed at subdivision. Currently, the property now is all within the property lines of 783 Cuaulta. When it's impacting the neighboring property, those will be discussions that will happen with the approving officer to determine access for all involved.
Thank you. So if I'm hearing you, many of these questions will be answered through the process as it evolves, but without taking a decision here, it puts a stop on some of this. Or can you explain what would happen if this didn't pass?
Through the chair again, thank you. So the land use bylaw does each application does need to comply with the land use bylaw. So if this was to be denied, the subdivision plan or the plan would have to be changed to comply with the regulations. If they can't be complied to, here they are varied, and which is what the applicant has chosen. So yes, if the variances aren't approved at this stage, a revision to a plan would likely have to happen. That's again slightly more for the approving officer. My apologies, but that's what I understand.
Thank you, and sorry to put you on the spot, but if I understand correctly, that you know, if this was denied, it's not a deal breaker. There would be some back and forth with staff, and they would try and retool and work with existing zoning and what have you. I am going to propose something here too, and if everybody is amenable, from what I heard from James, that perhaps a portion of it is acceptable, which I think isn't a stretch. So if someone would like to make a motion to sever, then what we'll do is we'll sever those two items. One would be the roadway and the other would be the setback. And then we just do it we treat it in two lots. Thank you, James. So a motion to sever. So Amanda, we're going to sever the setback from the road. Is anyone opposed? Seeing none, thank you. So I would like to call the question for firstly, the setback. So the setback is moving from, the request is moving from 7.5 meters, which is the existing bylaw, to 7.2 meters, which is the proposed variance, given the existing dwelling does predate incorporation. All those in favor? Yeah, thank you. That passes unanimous. Amanda, thank you. So item number 2, any further discussion about the second portion, which is the roadway, which is the variance from 6 meters to 5.3? Yeah. It's got you in his head. 1 second. It has you in as Kathleen.
All right. Cheers. Thank you. My question is more of a comment more than a question at this stage, is that the access for the alignment of the two plots to create a unified driveway. I understand that to really resolve that issue, you're probably not going to know the details until the development comes along a little bit further in terms of how your setback or your roadway to the property and the trees. But on the surface, the variance from 6 down to 5.3 on either sides seems reasonable in order to provide that access. I get what the client is trying to do. I just would think the devil is kind of in the details, really, ultimately, when it comes down to how that is, they resolve the access and the grades and saving the trees. So, so I think from an overview, I don't necessarily disagree with the variance request.
So. Perfect. If you're finished, sorry, Kate. You know, another option here is rather than deny the variances, we could defer it and seek further direction or further information. And I believe Ms. Fielden will have heard some of the questions of council, so could communicate that with the proponent to see if there are answers that already exist, and then it could come back at a future date. That is an option as well, or an outright denial. So pleasure of the committee. Go ahead.
I'd like to hear from the city what the practical implications are of deferring a decision with respect to the second variance.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. Yeah, we would be talking with the applicant about your concerns and the letters that have come in from neighboring properties. I will also familiarize myself slightly more with the subdivision kind of queries that you're asking. So at this point, I don't see any implications coming from deferring it. If you'd like the answers at the next council meeting.
Would there be any delay?
Sorry, may you repeat that?
Would there be any delay
Any delay?
as a result of the deferral?
If we would just to defer for the week and we would come back at council, I don't suspect that would be like extend the process to get to final subdivision we still have to do the environmental development permit, which will require some extra time as well. So this isn't the end all be all for the entire process. If we were to defer it to the next council meeting, we would have enough time to hopefully answer your questions.
So next council session or next committee session, would it not have to come back to committee first, which meets quarterly, Kelsey?
The chair, great question. Currently, this item is scheduled for this coming Monday's council meeting. So at this point, it would come forward with the recommendation, whatever it may be, from this committee tonight, but it is scheduled for council consideration this coming Monday night.
I got you. Thank you. So in other words, sorry, anything to add, Mr. Earl?
I think, given that this is coming to council, if this committee were to be providing the advice that it be deferred because there were some unanswered questions, as Ms. Fielden has indicated, those questions would likely come with answers should we get them within the week, and then council can adjudicate both your concerns and your recommendation and may make a decision, a final decision, or they may turn it back to the committee. That would be at council's discretion.
Gotcha. So there is no requirement for it to come back to us in next quarter, which would slow it down a few months. So if everybody understood, it will go to council regardless. And if we make a motion to deny or defer or otherwise, that will be reflected in our motion to council. And then it's council's ultimate discretion to deal with that, with the caveat that some of these unanswered inquiries might be able to be answered to the satisfaction of council based on some of your questions by the next council session. Okay. Does that?
Yeah, it does.
Perfect. So I am going to look for a motion then for the roadway. We have discussed a few options. If someone would like to make a motion so we can move things along. Go ahead.
Yeah, I am very pleased to hear that us providing recommendation to defer is not going to be problematic for the process. I think there's a lot of opportunity for this particular lot, but as of right now, with so little knowns, it's hard to be endorsing of it. And for that reason, if as long as this committee is not saying that, yes, we're in support and on board of the plan. And hopefully some of those unanswered questions do come forward. That would be wonderful.
Thank you. So a motion, thank you, and no seconder required. So I'd like to call the question. All those in favor? Sorry, this is for the deferral of this, that portion, the second portion, which is the roadway only. We've already passed the other portion, so it's just the roadway. And James has made the motion to defer, and I've called the question for all those in favor. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. Sorry, sorry about that. Perfect. Moving right along now. 5.2, Daniel.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, committee members. My name is Daniel Lake. I recently joined the City of Colwood as a planning technician. The agenda item I will be presenting tonight is a development variance permit for 651 Allandale Road. The applicant is requesting to vary section 11 of sign bylaw number 60 to enable signage at the Glen Oak Ford dealership that is currently under construction at 651 Allandale Road. The applicant seeks 3 variances: to increase the number of freestanding signs from 1 to 3, to increase the number of fascia signs from 1 to 5, and to increase the height of one fascia sign from 1.2 to 1.27 meters. .651 Allandale is located on the southeast corner of the intersection of Veterans Memorial Parkway and Allandale Road. The property is zoned M2 General Industrial and is within Sign District C. The property falls under the Mixed Use Employment Center OCP designation. The applicant has proposed a total of 8 signs for the Glen Oak Ford dealership. 2 of the signs, highlighted by the green box, are compliant with Sign District C regulations. For the variances, the applicant seeks to increase the permitted height of one fascia sign by 7 centimeters. This is the Ford logo sign. Increase the number of permitted fascia signs from 1 to 5, and increase the number of freestanding signs from 1 to 3. As I mentioned earlier, 651 Allandale Road is located within the Mixed Use Employment Center designation in the OCP. The intent of the Mixed Use Employment Center is support uses that generate employment opportunities in currently underutilized areas of Colwood, including industrial uses. The proposed signage is congruent with some of the OCP design guidelines for mixed-use employment centers. Namely, the signage adheres to human scale design. The 2 additional freestanding signs are both less than 1 meter in height. As well, the proposed fascia signs help to break up the facade of the building and provide visual interest. Development notification signs have been posted on site, and postcards have been sent to neighbors within 75 meters advising them of the proposed variances. Committee may wish to recommend to council one of the following options. The development variance permit be approved. The committee itemize the items, the different variances that should be considered for approval by council, that the development variance permit be deferred for further information, or that the development variance permit be denied. Thank you for your time. Myself and the applicant are here to answer any questions, should you have any.
Thank you, Daniel. And before we get to questions, is there anything that the applicant wishes to share, or are they just available for questions?
I'm just available for questions if you have anything you'd like to know about the design or whatnot.
Thank you. Now we'll bring it back to the committee table. And there you go.
Hi, Ryan. Thank you for helping us out. I do have a few questions to ask you, so I hope your legs are feeling strong. I'm looking at page 74 of the 122 pages and your table 1. And what I'm trying to grasp is the adjacent zones around this particular property. So what I'm curious about is the 2 residential zones. Can you tell me what's up in that regard? I'm very concerned about impact on residents. And so if you have any information you can share with me in terms of what the future holds, I know you don't have a crystal ball, but some assistance so that we can make an as informed decision as possible.
Yeah, thank you for the great question. So the 2 zones to the north of Allandale and to the south, there are currently no residential buildings in those 2 parcels of land. They are currently vacant. I'm personally not aware of any existing development applications for residential units at those lots. So at least for the time being, they are vacant.
And will that zoning ever change, or are we pretty much sure that those 2 areas are going to be residential?
I'm not aware of any rezoning applications currently in place for those 2 lots, but that may change in the future.
Okay.
Just one small point. Those are commercial lands, and there's been significant discussion around the council table about that area. And there's no, in that immediate adjacent area, no contemplation or discussion ever was had about rezoning for residential because it's upzoned to commercial.
I'm speaking of the ones that are currently zoned
Okay.
residential.
So there is zoned residential across the street
That's what I'm
above
asking.
McDonald's. Okay,
Right.
but that's the nearest.
The ones that are kind of up on a ledge looking down
Exactly.
on the Ford. And then the other one is vacant. Okay. I'll ask my next questions afterwards if you want to follow up on those.
And maybe this is just also a bit of a clarification. I was curious about the plots to the south that are designated R1. There is a residential street that comes to a dead end, and then there's a bit of a space, and then there's residential plot, and then there's a giant landscaped berm, and then you get into the plots. So where I'm curious about is where the large tall sign, although I don't have an issue with the size of it, but actually the location is, you know, if that entrance in that corner comes in, does it scrape away some of that berm, and then it's going to further expose that sign to the residential units to the south? And then the next question is, located that sign, do you know what the distance is from the front property line to the actual center point of the sign is? Just to want to make sure that it's set back far enough.
Yeah, thank you for your questions. So to the immediate south of 651 Allandale, we do have that vacant lot that's kind of acting as a buffer. Beyond that vacant lot, as we continue south, we have Susan Marie Place, where there are some residential lots. But as we discussed earlier, there is that buffer of vacant lots separating those 2 parcels. In terms of the actual placement of the freestanding sign, the distance from those lot lines, I'm not too sure at the moment. But that is also one of the signs, while it is proposed for the Glenelg Ford site, it's not one of the signs that are currently being considered for a variance.
I guess my one concern about the tall freestanding sign is that it's set back far enough from the property, because I do believe that there is an actual minimum requirement to be met. And that whole corner is kind of probably the only real concern that I had issue with all of the variances. So just want to make sure that it meets that requirement.
Yeah, so all signage and buildings, they would have to meet our required setbacks before any approval.
Thank you. You're going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage perhaps if you don't have the official community plan in front of you. So please don't feel put on the spot. But I did review that and I just wanted to make sure that we have looked at the entire document. I also have questions as well about the current bylaw number 60. So I'm just going to go page number by page number, if you can bear with me. Page 176 of the official community plan. We have signage guidelines 25.17, which would also apply, I believe, to this particular site. So I'm wondering if you could comment on that. Did you turn your mind to this? Or have you any comments that you wish to make? Or is this something that we need more information on? And there's other ones as well. I can go through the various provisions. We can speak globally about it. Up to you. If you want to do it one by one or.
Yeah, so I'm not familiar with every OCP guideline off the top of my head. If do you mind speaking to that OCP guideline a little bit, and I'll do my best to comment.
Okay, so what I'm looking at is the general number 25, which is called the general something. Bear with me. Flipping through. (156). 25, general multifamily, commercial and light industrial, which includes the multi-unit employment centers. So all of 25 applies, I think. So we've got 25.17. Don't know if anybody wants me to read the content, we might want to kind of look at all of the things that I'm mentioning. And if you maybe come to the conclusion we need more information, rather than, again, put you on the spot, we might want to discuss that. So there's 25.17, which I believe applies. We've caught 25.18. Now it references A, but there's other provisions, including B and G, that I think might apply, but some of the terminology I don't think is defined, and again, further discussion would be required. Then there's 25.19, which is about lighting, and the signs are illuminated, and there is a provision in particular about light pollution, which is something that I care about. So that I would say is also applicable. Then we have section 28. I don't think it's applicable, but we may want to think about what the intentions of the city of Colwood are. And I'll speak more again to kind of my concern that I don't have a good sense of what Colwood's intentions are in this regard. And it's kind of a transition issue. So there's section 28, which is light industrial centers. On figure 20, it shows another area as a light industrial center. However, it's zoned as a general industrial center. It looks like there's some confusion, and that's why I don't feel confident that I actually know the intentions of Colwood and the official community plan in this regard. There's some confusion, and it's not a criticism of anybody. This is a massive plan. This stuff comes up. And unfortunately, I'm one of those detail people. So there we have it. If 28 does apply, I don't know. Again, I'd like to know the city's intentions. There's 28.11, which deals with signage. So that's just out there. And I'm not going to comment. Then we go to the bylaw 60 itself. And again, I just want to express my concern, confusion around the transition. So you've identified very well in your document, kind of about the different terminology or labels that we give under the existing signage bylaw and the official community plan. So there is a disconnect as well, and I know that you've noted it. And you noted, for example, that there are different zones, multi-use 1, multi-use 2, multi-use, M2, which is general industrial. So in the official community plan, it's light industrial and there's no general. So I don't know. There's an issue with that signage terminology, and how the city deals with it is kind of, again, up to the city, but it makes me concerned that I don't have a good sense of the intentions of the city. And I know for sure the inconsistency with respect to the Allandale district, and you've got all kinds of different zones that don't seem to match the verbiage, even the general verbiage with respect to the Allandale pit. And it looks like some discussion is continuing to go on internally in terms of how we deal with that. So I'm met with a concern that I don't feel confident right now, that I understand the intentions of the city as expressed in bylaw number 60 versus the official community plan. So that's kind of just a general statement that I want to make. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel that I have enough information, and I don't feel that I'm serving the city given that particular issue. And the last thing I wanted to ask, and I know that there's probably not going to be an answer, but what I looked at is the date of the amendments on the signage bylaw. And we've got some current ones, April 11, 2023 and March 18, 2023. So maybe I'll put this question to everybody. Were those amendments made in consideration of the official community plan? And if anyone can help me out in terms of what changes were made, that might help my confusion in terms of where we go from here.
Daniel.
Sorry.
So while I'm not too familiar with those specific bylaw amendments, it's definitely something I can look into and get back to you on.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that's a very detailed analysis of some of the conflict we do see on a fairly regular basis. Sometimes the two documents don't dovetail completely. And I wonder if Jen or somebody might have some insight into how we can extrapolate some of this. I think in really general terms, that zone, the Allandale district there, the intention is it be entirely commercial. And I understand that they've created this new MUEC, and but I mean, if you accept, generally speaking, that district is going to be commercialized and there's going to be businesses that require signage, I don't think that's an extreme leap in logic. And as far as some of the discrepancies with the OCP, I mean, firstly, the OCP is up for review in this 2023 year, leading into 2024, and it is an overarching framework for the community and its development and its growth. So you're correct, and you're correct in identifying that sometimes our bylaws are in what appears to be conflict with, and that bylaw 60, the sign bylaw is something we've dealt with a couple of times in the last term, that there's some old verbiage in there. So I'm not sure if staff has any input at all that they would like to share, or if there's a way we can bridge some of these gaps. The one thing I would like to note, some of your lighting does need to be compliant with our what do they call it, our bright skies, whatever it is. So we do have regulations internally for our street lights and stuff like that. So
Okay.
I think
Well, it's alluded to as well, and the one of the sections does talk about the impact of light pollution upon the night sky, which I assume would dovetail with those regulations.
Right, so we have fairly strict requirements for
Okay.
the streetlights and what have you. So those, I'm assuming, would apply to a lit sign as well. We'll go with a yes, thank you. And staff, Mr. Borhill, the OCP is your baby, right?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Certainly excited to get into the minutia of design guidelines. So I've just brought the laptop up here so I can get the section straight. So this site, as noted in the staff report, is located within the mixed use employment center designation. So within the fish committee plan, that's actually shown in the map at the beginning in the land use management section. So that means that the general multifamily, commercial and light industrial design guidelines would apply in section 25, as well as the more specific guidelines in section 29. So that's the mixed use employment centers design guidelines. The centers design guidelines in section 27 would not apply to this specific case.
Which one?
Section 27 under centers. Centers are actually
Yes.
defined as specific areas, yes.
So section 25 applies and the second one was,
Section 29 mixed use employment centers. So the land use designation for this site is mixed use employment center. So that's why the section 29 applies. Section 25, which are the general guidelines, are meant to cover, broadly speaking, most types of residential multifamily development, as well as commercial and light industrial.
So the issue I have is I have a sign bylaw, which isn't dovetailing perfectly yet. And my approach, and I'm legally trained, so I look to the spirit of the official community plan as well. And I have to say, in terms of determining what guides me, the conflicts kind of trouble me. And that's why I'm concerned about making a decision. I mean, we can agree, all right, 25, 19 for sure is something that we deal with and talk about light pollution. But I really would like some clarity from the city in terms of, all right, this is where we see it going. This is, you know, do we see a conflict with bylaw 60, which calls this a general industrial zone, which is not the multi-use. It includes light industrial and commercial. So, I mean, and I even looked up, you know, what's included in the zoning. And you've got retail, automobile sales and repair going in both industrial and commercial. So I just don't have the clarity and I don't feel all that confident making decisions. I can certainly ask questions of the proponent, but to make a decision, I don't feel I have enough clarity on where the city stands. The spirit of the OCP is something that I really, you know, want to pay great attention to. So I would prefer some clarity in that regard.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, happy to continue to speak on this subject to try to help. So absolutely, the sign bylaw as has been noted is quite a bit older than our current version of the 2018 OCP. It is one of the sort of top bylaws that we feel should be updated to reflect the intent of the OCP, and I would argue that the design guidelines as specified in the fishing plan are fair game for this committee to consider in this application. The design guidelines are intended to provide for the visual aesthetics and interface with the public realm such that it's more conducive to a pleasant place to walk, a pleasant place to be, as opposed to signage that's meant to grab your attention as you drive by at 50 or 60 kilometers an hour. That being said, we have a disconnect in Colwood in terms of there being a lot of signage that was designed along those older expectations. The OCP is aspirational in terms of its intention to apply to new development and shift away from that auto-orientated public realm. And we're going to have to consider these situations where there is a property owner that is putting up a signage with that intent to grab people's attention, and the conflict with the OCP's intention to create more pedestrian oriented signage. So I don't know if that helps for clarity, but that there is a disconnect there. And where this is applied most specifically in terms of the design guidelines is through development permits. So large projects that require a development permit for form and character, staff will be applying these design guidelines and then elevating variances where need be relative to the sign bylaw.
So did you get that answer, which is, yes, it's an old bylaw, but we're still being looked at to take a decision that, reflects the will of the committee. Can I turn to the other committee members now and see if anyone else has any input? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Kathleen, you actually bring up a really good point about the light pollution and not something that I had thought of when reviewing this particular item. One of the things that we're here today to speak to specifically is effectively the count of signage. And one of the things that we're being asked to speak to, I'm sure if there were other variances being asked for with respect to lighting and setbacks, we'll hopefully address those in upcoming meetings, if not already addressed in previous. When looking at the size of the lot, the total count of 10 unique signs doesn't feel outrageous. And only one of which is exceeding the height, like the sizing requirement. So, and only by a marginal amount. So the sort of big non-compliance that we're tackling here today is if there's too much attention being brought to the dealership through an excessive use of signage. The one thing that I would perhaps say is that, do you need that many Ford signs? I do like the Glen Oak. I do like the fact that they have service post pillars, I'll say, right outside the ingress of the lot to bring attention there. But overall, I don't think there's a particular problem with the total count of signage based on the size of the lot, but there are other valid concerns being brought forward. And if we were to recommend a particular sort of adjustment, is maybe you can cut down on one mega Ford sign altogether. Thank you.
And thank you, James. Michael, anything arising? Hang on, just give me a sec here. Go.
Oh, thank you. And I would agree with your sentiments there. I think all in all, like the size of and the number of signs indicated seems proportionate to the size and the use of the site. So, and I do hear what you're saying about maybe reducing one of the Ford signs on. I think that would maybe get in a discussion more of an architectural facade argument. So it's here nor there on my part. So I'm going to say in terms of the number of signs for the site, I don't have any sort of real pushback from my side.
Thank you so much. And I would like to say that some of this, I do take your point about the Ford signs, but some of this you might classify as almost the term I'm thinking of is wayfinding. So it helps with the direction of traffic and the ingress and the egress and stuff like that. So I see some of it as being a sort of a net benefit, not to people arriving in that area, not just out and out marketing. And I'm not sure, Kathleen, if we'll resolve the conflict with the sign bylaw, but I've made a note. I'm going to make a note here, and it is something that has come up in the past. And I do believe that the sign bylaw should be reinvigorated, shall we say. And go ahead.
I'm glad because I didn't want to tell the city what it should be doing, but this just puts people in a bind. I do want to also mention that there's two sections that I've brought up that are relevant to the signage and, in my view, relevant to the number. I don't know how we can make the decision absent looking at all of the applicable sections. So I can't make a decision on numbers because the light pollution, for example, it's right there in the community plan. I can't, you know, the number of signs that we allow are going to influence light pollution. I just can't, you know, I leave it to the rest of you to decide what you want to do, but we have a problem in that our report didn't make mention of other relevant provisions in the official community plan. So I don't know how we can make a decision with looking at only one subsection of one section. It's just, this speaks to deferral or, you know, so that we can.
Information.
And I do want to hear from the city about where it stands with respect to 2517 and 2519, right? I feel that the city deserves that. I don't want to make a decision without the city not having had the chance to look at the entire community plan. So if we're going to look at part of the community plan, then we need to look at all the relevant parts as
So
far as I'm concerned.
I'm hearing your discomfort, and if there is a motion in there that you would like to present to the committee here, you know, I'm happy to advance that for discussion and a resolution.
I would move that we defer the application for the variation until we have further information and input from.
Okay,
Colin
thank you.
City.
So the motion on the table is for a deferral, and that's a deferral to seek some direction as far as how this application fits with the official community plan discussion. Seeing no discussion, I would like to call the question. All those in favor of the deferral? And that motion fails. Thank you, Kathleen. Is there anyone that would like to present a new motion?
Sorry, I gotta wait a minute. There we are. One of the things that I'm interested in understanding is how far through this process are we? Like, once the variance endorsement from committee and approval from council goes through, what other steps are there? You know, there is more information to come forward. I don't think there's anything in question there. And I'd just like to understand what other sort of evaluation is required before it's, you know, shovels hitting the ground and the implementation of what's being recommended.
It's an excellent question. Thank you. With the Glen Oak Ford dealership, it is under construction currently and is nearing completion. And so depending on what committee and council bring forward, if it's approved, for example, there will be a permit issued to the applicant where they can start the construction on the signage. And when they decide to put that signage up, I'm not too certain.
And as part of the permit approval process, further consideration to the intent of the OCP is assumed to be involved as part of that.
So if it is approved by council, will be further consideration for the OCP? Unless there were.
So the OCP guidelines were completed at the development permit stage. So the sign permit is for the regulations of the sign bylaw. So the discussion tonight will just be for the regulations of the sign bylaw, not in consideration to the official community plan, as that was done as the development permit stage, which is now building permit stage. So all the considerations of signage and the forming character of the building was done at development permit stage.
Thank you very much. And knowing that further scrutiny will be applied to this permit as it carries forward, I personally don't see a reason to hinder progress. But I am extremely happy to have brought forward the fact that there are several items of concern that need consideration during the permit process. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to recommend to council to approve this variance.
Thank you. Motion on the floor, sorry, the motion on the table is to approve the variance discussion. No, we're at discussion.
Yeah.
So seeing some discussion here, thank you.
We have a problem. My inclination is to abstain because I need more information. If I abstain, we don't have a quorum. Sorry,
Yeah,
I can or cannot?
There's-
Cannot.
I see Mr. Earl moving. Go ahead, Mr. Earl. Thank you.
An abstention is a vote in the affirmative.
In the affirmative.
If you choose to abstain or declare you're abstaining, you're
Oh, okay.
technically voting in favor of the motion that's on the table.
Okay, thank you.
Press the button for me, I think. And I got you. Go.
This is just a discussion.
Discussion, yes.
So from my point of view, like I said, the number of signs and the recommendations make sense as from a wayfinding point of view. It's not, I think, over the top in terms of marketing. Obviously, being on Betchens, it's a fairly major road. It is a vehicle road. I know there is bicycle lane, and it is a car dealership, so cars will be driving to it. So I do get the sense the reason why some of the signage size and the location is there, and I don't disagree with it. The wayfinding signs I agree with. I think sort of the only concern I have is the large standalone sign in the southwest corner, and its location is the only thing that I have a real concern with, and that's the only thing from my point of view. I'd like that maybe to be explained a bit further, and then perhaps that ties in with your concern with the lighting. Is because it's the largest sign, it's nearly 6 meters in height. Is it lit up? If it's lit up, what are the hours in which it's lit up from? Does it turn off at 11 p.m. so that the neighbors to the south don't have this forward mounted sign? That's really kind of the only concern I see.
So Daniel, maybe we can get some feedback from the proponent on what the intention is on the part of the business. Is that Mr. Matthews?
Yes, sorry, I was having a little trouble unmuting myself there. Yeah, so we would definitely follow whatever regulations the city has for lighting. We obviously want to be good neighbors as well. The sign that you're speaking about, the large ground sign, would meet all setbacks that are laid out in the bylaw. I believe to the southern property line, we're almost about 9 meters away as is. So that's quite a bit more than the bylaw requests. And also we could potentially install dimmers, timers, and go on whatever the city feels is necessary for if there's any complaints, etc.
Thank you, Ryan and Daniel. Is there restrictions in place on hours and brightness or timing, or because I'm not aware of any? Are you?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any restrictions currently in place regarding that.
Okay, but Mr. Matthews, you have heard some of the concerns from this committee, and you know, we would certainly appreciate that being reflected with the owners of the business on our behalf.
For sure. And if you were to make a decision based on a condition that a timer or a dimmer be installed, or there was hours of operation, I'm sure I could take that back to them and talk about that as well.
Okay, thank you. So there is potential there for an amendment as far as hours or anything like that. Would you like to suggest something, Michael? Go ahead and press. Hang on. Go.
I guess I'd like to propose that we approve the applicant with the amendment that the large freestanding sign to the south corner solution or recommendation is further added to how it affects the dark sky, whether it's through timers or its illumination or something along that lines.
Dark sky compliant.
Yeah.
Can you help us with the phraseology there, Daniel, a little bit?
Yeah, I'll have to call on Mr. Earl here because the large freestanding sign is not one of the signs currently under consideration of this variance request. And so I'll ask him to speak to that.
Okay.
Through the chair, as mentioned, committee's making recommendations to council relative to variances that are required for these signs to proceed. If committee has advice relative to the applicant to adjudicate a position on the variances that are required that affects signs that don't require variance, I believe that advice should go to council for council to adjudicate.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Earl. So what I'm hearing is because that's not before us, that particular sign specifically, that it goes beyond our scope a little bit, but it behooves us to provide some feedback to council. So if we can note in the minutes, please, Amanda, that some concerns have been expressed about the freestanding sign in the southwest corner and the brightness, the hours of operation, and we'll include that when it goes forward to council. So we're going to abandon the amendment. There was no mover anyways. And we're back to the main motion, which is approval of the DVP 23-003 before us at 651 Allandale Road. I would like to call the question. Is there any final discussion? Seeing none, I would like to call the question. All those in favor? And that motion passes. The chair's in favor and opposed. And Kathleen's opposed. Thank you. So that motion passes. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, committee.
Thank you as well. Have a good evening.
And anything further? Sorry, I would like to come back to, thank you. Go ahead.
I've discussed at length the conflict or the inconsistencies between the Colwood sign bylaw number 60 and the official community plan. I'd ask that we move to recommend that council consider reviewing and amending the sign bylaw so that there is greater clarity for the future.
Thank you. I'm just going to seek guidance from staff. Is that within the scope of this committee to make such a recommendation forward to council?
Absolutely.
Thank you. And no seconder was required. I would like to call that, sorry, discussion first. Seeing none, all those in favor? And it's unanimous. And thank you for that. And I would seek a motion for adjournment. Thank you, Michael. And anyone opposed to adjournment? Seeing none, thank you very much. And we're adjourned. Thank you, staff members. Thank you, Daniel. Thanks for the backup, Ian.